This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 62. Aleyda Solis. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Experts on the Wire. I'm very excited for my guest today, whose name I just practiced pronouncing, and I'm going to try to get it right. I have it right here, Aleyda Solis. How did I do?
Hello, Dan. Amazing. And don't worry at all. Like it's very, very common for non-Spanish speakers to get it wrong, but you in this case did amazingly. So yeah. That's cool. Very cool.
I had a little practice and training, and also I want to make a disclaimer up front to the listeners that there might be a few other words in Spanish I try to pronounce through this episode. I apologize if I get that wrong and completely butcher it horribly, but that's just how it goes, right? When you're trying to do a second language. So, and that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, in fact, is international SEO, multilingual SEO. But first, Aleyda, I wanted to ask you, you have actually a background in web development. And on your LinkedIn page, it said you went to, here's my first pronunciation, Universidad Americana. And so I was curious, why the background in web development? How did you get into that? And then tell us a little bit about that university.
Yeah, indeed. You know, I am originally from Nicaragua, and I studied systems engineering. And in our first year of university, there was this HTML course that was given like it was not part of the curriculum actually, but you know, you could go if you wanted. I was so pissed when I found out that I couldn't attend because I had a class at the same time. So I ended up self learning and self-teaching myself like HTML because I didn't want it to be, you know, typical new student type of thing left out, right? And after that, I participated that there was this type of event that they gave some prizes to the best web pages that were developed by the students, whatever. So I ended up participating, ended up winning it, and ended up realizing that I really loved web design, front-end web development, and I started to work from there. And that's the way I started to actually in the professional life when I was in second year of university, working as a part-time web designer, web developer. And at the end of the day, years after that, that's how I ended up into SEO, right? I developed websites. I actually created content, and the next step was to promote the site in order to get visits and conversions and revenue and profit at the end of the day, the final goal, right? And that's how I ended up going into SEO, like a natural evolution of the next stage of the process.
Yeah, that's exactly how it worked for me. I'm curious, was it the HTML itself that just interested you, like the idea of coding something, or was it more like you saw a website or you had a website you needed to make and you said, I want to make that? Like, what was the initial interest for you?
Well, actually, I loved front-end development, and HTML is because it's so logic, it's so simple. At the same time, you know, and this is funny because I actually had to learn to code when I was in school because I was studying systems engineering. So I learned to code in Lisp and C# and then C++ and other languages that were, of course, far more complex. What I really liked and value of HTML and front-end coding and JavaScript or CSS, for example, in that case, is that it's so easy for you, because I'm also a very visual person, to see the outcome. And it's so easy also to debug and validate, which at some point it might be a little bit far more painful with other type of languages out there. So that is why I ended up focusing on that, because it was so easy so logic and so easy to identify at some point issues, and also to obtain the final outcome and revenue. And also at the end of the day, I also enjoyed the final goal and outcome that was to establish a presence online. At that point, it was in 1999. It was still very, very young, not like now, right? That you can really easily generate or publish a site with whatever platform or CMSs that are out there, right?
It's interesting, yes, because working on the web, on a computer, it's hard to get that direct kind of tangible feeling of a result of causing an output or causing something to happen. And I can relate to that because yes, HTML, like you code it, you code the front end, you can see the result. And I completely understand that. And it does give a little bit of that tangible feeling of the result. So also Universidad Americana, where was that, that university?
Yes, that is Nicaragua. I studied engineering in Nicaragua. I graduated and then I came to Spain to study a master in e-commerce at Universidad de Salamanca here. So yes, that I started doing something much more technical oriented. But then I understand when I started with web development, etc., that I really enjoy. I wanted to learn more about online e-commerce, etc. So that is why I came and ended up studying in a master here.
That makes sense. So let's fast forward to now, and then we're going to get to teaching the listeners about international SEO and mobile SEO. So for everyone listening, we're going to get to all the good actionable stuff that you can implement. But I want to ask you a few other things first about yourself. How do you divide your time now? I know you do a ton of stuff. You speak, you write content, you work with clients. Like, can you give us like the slice of the pie? Like, how do you divide your work time now?
Yes, well, it's very funny because probably the things that I enjoy the most out of being an SEO are completely different things. Like on one hand, because of also that technical type of background that I have, I love doing audits. I love crawling, researching, analyzing, identifying patterns, identifying sources of issues, also analyzing for example, the traffic trend of a client, etc., to understand where the problems are and target the actions there. And also, for example, doing an audience keyword competition analysis to identify the opportunities. I love doing that on one hand, but then at the same time, again, yes, I love going to conferences, networking events. I am an extrovert, so I need that. So even like working for myself, that is how I feel that part of that necessity, right, of interaction, social interaction. So I try to keep and divide my time in these two big things, like being now an independent SEO, a consultant, having my own consultancy. I have like the big benefit to be able to like optimize my time, allocate my time in these things as much as I can. I have two people who support me, who work with me on doing, for example, data gathering, segmentation of information, or invoices and operative that type of stuff that I don't really enjoy or where I really deliver much value, right? So this is, of course, always like a work in process, of course, like to try as much as possible to focus my time and be able to do these things that I really enjoy and then minimize those that I don't. Another thing too is that I really enjoy traveling. So for example, I don't know if you are aware, but I also have like a parallel project that is called Remoters besides my SEO consultancy. Mm-hmm. So we Remoters, what I have with another colleague is a website with tons of resources for remote-based companies and individuals, mostly freelancers, right? So we have like tools, interviews of people sharing about the remote journey, how they work on the go or as a digital nomad, how they work from wherever they want, like location independence. And we have a job board for remote jobs too. So this actually is something that I really believe in, and that's why I'm like such a promoter of not necessarily being restricted of working somewhere specifically to be able to deliver value or to be able to develop yourself professionally. That is one of my other big focuses and where I try to make the most out of also the opportunity of what I am experiencing myself, right?
I can completely relate. Yesterday, I probably had about 5 hours of phone calls with clients, and you'd think somebody would be tired after all of that, right? But like yourself, I value the human interaction. It gives me energy as well. Yeah. Can completely relate. And also, I could see how excited you are talking about the detective work that goes into SEO, the aspect of looking for the problems, looking for the errors, finding those things and giving them to clients. I can see you get really excited about all of that. And it that's a good thing, right? It helps you do better work, probably. One last question I was curious about for you, when you're doing SEO, do you find speaking multiple languages helps you, not in a multilingual sense or doing Spanish SEO because you speak Spanish, but in the sense of like, does knowing Spanish help you understand English better and maybe have a better grasp on things like search intentions or understanding the hidden meanings behind what people are looking for.
Yeah, indeed. The fact that I am able to work, and I have worked in projects that have been targeted for many different type of audiences abroad, provide me some type of much wealth of data. I would say much more diversity of data than if you've only worked for a single market or a single industry in one language. You will see, right? So I identify always like parallelism, and especially when I am working for clients that are somehow in the same sector. For example, I had a property client for Mexico and another one in Brazil, and then another one in the US. And of course, the terms are in different languages, completely different. But it's so funny to see, like, for example, in some markets, people tend to search things in a very generic, like the properties in a very generic, non-location, adding like not adding a specific location, not restricting like houses, for example, or properties to a specific location, and then in another country to see like the behavior is completely different or is the same, for example. But you have that already initial input that will allow you to really go to directly, if you already validate and see that the behavior initially is the same. So it's much easier for you to go and try to find this type of landing pages that should exist in order to gather that type of search behavior, right? And because this is the type of content that the user or the audience will likely like to obtain. And if you don't find it, it's like a very low hanging fruit for you to go and try to find it. And if you don't, it's something that you should right away go and recommend, because you have already seen it in other markets, right? So it's nice to have this type of I would say, yes, diversity of input that will certainly facilitate and make you advance faster at some point.
Interesting. So you're taking findings from one market or one country and then applying those or relating those to another area, and that's super interesting. So that definitely took it in a slightly different direction than might. Sometimes you realize when you ask questions and do interviews, your questions might lead to answers that I would assume. But in this case, you actually had a totally different answer than I was assuming would be the case. But I love that because it actually brings about certain thoughts and topics and opportunities that I never would have thought of, and maybe the listeners never would have thought of either, with me leading the answer to that. So that's super interesting. That segues nice into some international SEO tips that I'd love to bring the audience. First, can you just give us like a broad definition? When people hear international SEO, what's kind of the overview of what that actually is?
The overview is when you are whether targeting other markets, abroad markets, other countries, or if you're targeting even audiences in your own country, but in other languages, multilingual, right? Because you may have audiences that will look for even your local business, but maybe you are like, let's say, I don't know, like a winning boutique hotel, whatever, that everybody will try to stay at, and you have people coming from Germany or Australia or the UK, right? So
yes.
Even if you are a very local business, you really want to be found and optimized and to connect with those type of potential clients that will want to consume your business. I clarify this because a lot of people think, oh, I don't deliver abroad, or I don't provide any service abroad, right? So you can see that not only for those circumstances, but even if your business is sensible to provide any value or deliver any service for people who might be even locally, but speaking all the languages and searching in different ways, right? So yes, these two main scenarios. If you reach and you can provide content, service, products, whatever you offer on your sites to overseas markets, to other countries, or if you want to reach also audiences from different type of backgrounds. Like, for example, even if you have a blog and you're considering that you are already number one for all your queries and in your sector in English, and then you think, oh, why I don't have like a Spanish version and start bringing all those Spanish-speaking people who are millions and might want to consume my content, right? The same way.
It's funny, that jumps to another question that I had for a little bit later. I want to ask first, though, Does somebody need to actually be fluent or somewhat able to speak in the other language to do international SEO or to do SEO in that other language? Like, is that, because sometimes I've had inquiries from people that have a German website and I turn them away because I don't speak German, obviously. So I'm curious, is it possible to provide international SEO even if you don't speak that second language?
Of course, that will be the ideal scenario, that you speak that language, and that will highly facilitate things, right? But I have clients from Brazil and I don't speak Portuguese, even if it is like very like Spanish. At the end of the day, I don't speak Portuguese. Or clients from Germany and I don't speak German. But there's one thing: once that you have started doing international SEO, you are aware of certain validations and aspects that you really need to verify. And if you do have a sort of framework to get it and to have that multilingual support, native multilingual support, that is what is key and important. So, for example, for the keyword research, of course you will need native support. Of course you will need that German person, native German person, to support you to find the hottest queries and the queries that are grammatically correct, and the ones that you are really need to use to develop content about, and to identify the ones that are really the intent of them. So you really need that native support. However, for example, in order to do the technical audit and to map this into the organization of the website, or to establish like a strategy to develop like a specific project to target certain queries or areas that you really want to rank for. You might not necessarily be fluent necessarily in that language, but just have a good support of someone who is, and that you can have that ongoing validation all the time. Of course, at the beginning, it will be harder because you are very used to only do, for example, SEO processes in your own language. So you don't need that external input all the time. But when you start doing it, you just will need to set a framework where you will identify that you will need that additional language validation whenever you're taking certain steps to make sure that you are really aligned and you are really connecting with the behavior of that audience.
That makes sense. So what I'm hearing is essentially the closer it is to more of a technical thing, you could provide help with that because it doesn't relate to the keywords in the language. But the more it comes close to content and keywords and things that relate to the language, that's where you might need the support. And so is there the case sometimes where somebody will help with international SEO, but just have the support of somebody that speaks that language and maybe team up?
Yes. In fact, for example, many of my clients are like big brands, important big brands that they have an in-house SEO, or they have in-house SEO, search team already, but they are like starting a new market or want an external validation to identify and validate opportunities in new markets because they are not necessarily sure that they have completely validated them. For example, I support like companies even just for international configuration in certain markets too. So yes, it's a very, very common scenario, even if companies have their in-house SEO team also. Yeah,
that makes sense. So speaking of technical things, a question I see all of the time is around, do you put your different websites in subdomains, TLDs, subfolders? You're smiling because I'm sure you see this all of the time. So is there any one common answer to that, or is there like a best option? And so I guess let's split it into two things. One, let's say that you are a website that targets different countries, but all English. So Australia, US, Canada. How should you
language target?
Yeah. How should you configure that? Let's start there, and then maybe let's get to the more complicated scenario of different countries and different languages.
Indeed. So I actually, it is funny. I actually wrote a post about this in Search Engine Land, just about this, like step by step, right? So if you have a little bit of time, and also you want to dig into this topic much more, please look for it, like the post that I have written in Search Engine Land, and you will find it there.
We'll link to it in the show notes. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thanks. So actually, if you are language targeting, you have two options. Two feasible, somewhat optimized options, right? To target the language, each language with a subdomain or with a subdirectory. For example, if you are targeting French, you can have like fr.yourdomain or yourbrand.com, or yourbrand.com/fr. That's the two main options. You can have, of course, URLs with parameters, whatever, but that's not optimized. Like, these are the two options. The alternative for you will depend on really if you are that much of an authority. For example, let's say Mashable, this type of big blogs or big media, right? Usually they tend to select subdomains because authority for them is not an issue. They have all the links, all the endorsements, very spontaneous type of authority without any effort at the end of the day. And what they care about is to have a very simplified URL structure that allows them to index much more information, right? So at the end of the day, that is why they tend to select subdomains for languages instead of subdirectories, because they will have a shorter URL structure. And the problem with subdomains is that they won't allow you to consolidate as much your authority in a only one subdomain as you will have with subdirectories. But that is not an issue for them, of course. That is not their specific challenge. So in that case, if that is your same characteristics, these are the same characteristics that you share, no problem with authority, you do want to index a lot of information, you want to keep it shorter URL, then you can go that route. However, most of the scenarios are not that. The most common scenario is that you don't have all the links in the world. You really do need to work hard on your link building. So you really want to leverage the main domain, the main subdomain authority that you already have. So for example, if you have yoursite.com, you may want to directly enable .com/es/fr/de for Germany or whatever to inherit the popularity that www.yourdomain.com already has, and inherit that link popularity, so you don't need to start from scratch building a link authority with an entity specifically targeted towards a country. And we know that subdomains are treated somehow as independent entities in that regard, right? So in most cases, I will say that I usually recommend this second alternative with subdirectories, because yes, it adds a little bit of additional complexity in the URLs, but it allows you to inherit all this authority that you already have with your site. In most cases, this is the benefit that you would like to make the most out of.
Now, let's say you're working with a brand or a company that is completely global, right? They've got sites everywhere, languages everywhere. Should the main site be on a .com and be English as like the default or the primary version? How does that work? Because I've had some scenarios where the company didn't know if the main site should be the .com or should it be .co.uk if maybe they're located in the United Kingdom. Yeah. So how does that work?
So if you are country targeting, let's say you have a site version for each country in the world, and usually, and this is a reality, usually most of the sites start with a generic domain extension with a GTLD, right? .com, .net, .info, whatever. So that's okay, and that's really the ideal scenario, I will say, to start with. Because you will have two choices then when you go abroad. If you start in the US and then you want to target the UK market, you will have the choice of whether enabling a CCTLD for the UK, for example, yourdomain.co.uk in that case to target that specific country, or you have also the alternative of using your generic domain, the one that you already have, that you have been already using for the US or global, but that you may want to reuse also for individual countries by using subdomains again or subdirectories again. So you can have yourdomain.com/UK/ES for Spain /FR for France, not for French, for France in this case, for each individual country, for /CH for Switzerland, and so on, right? What are the pros and cons? The pro of having a CCTLD is that you will give this additional signal of geolocation to search engines, to Google, and also somehow also to the audience. When a user will see in the SERPs that the page is ranking with a specific page targeted towards you. Of course, this has, at the end of the day, an influence for sure. So that on one hand, those are the pros. The con, what is the con? That again, you start from scratch with a new entity, with a new property that you will need to start building and creating link authority for it in this new market. So in most cases, I would say, only if you are like this huge brand again that you can launch and you can manage to grow popularity and authority right ahead. The best, I will say, step-by-step scenario, I will say is that you start by reusing or leveraging your current generic domain, your name.com/UK for the UK. What you will do to compensate to not have this geolocation signal that the ccTLD will give you is to register that specific subdirectory in Google Search Console, in the Google Search Console, and then you will geolocate that specific subdirectory to the UK. The Google Search Console allows you to do that. So that is why it's very important that you register individually each subdirectory if you're using subdirectory, or each subdomain if you're using subdomain. So you can individually geolocate each one of them to the specific country that you're targeting. And then, of course, that you, in this case, you will try to also compensate a little bit the lack of local authority in those countries by, yes, creating links, creating mentions from that specific location. And then the good part is that you will be able, though, to inherit and leverage the previous authority that you had in your GTLD. What happens if you, let's say, you started, you are French, right? You started your business in France, and your first website is your brand.fr. If you want to target other countries, you cannot go with a subdirectory or with a subdomain if you are already using a ccTLD.
Oh, so you're limited then. Yep.
Yeah, so you're limited. So that is why I will say that in general, it's always good if you're not sure if you are going to go abroad or if you're going to stay in your own market, to sometimes start even with a GTLD, because you don't know that in 1 year maybe, instead of being pushed to really move to another ccTLD, you can just enable a subdirectory and that's it, and leverage your current authority, for example. So yes. That
is such a great overview. And I want to remind the listeners, all of this will be in the show notes, including links to your content about all of this. There's a couple things that, in case the listeners aren't hearing these very often, I just want to highlight. So ccTLD, that's your top level domain. So what Aleyda is referring to is .fr or .co.uk, just in case some people missed that part of it. And also, one thing I want to highlight, to my knowledge, is that when you have everything under the same .com and a subfolder, doesn't it make your analytics much easier to track as well?
Well, yes. Well, at the end of the day, you will like to keep your, let's say, generic view, but you will also like to apply filters, generate additional profiles and apply filters to them, so you can individually follow up and segment and see the specific activity for each one of the international targets that you have to. But yes, like at the end of the day, this is always tricky. Independence also of how you want to internally report this, right? Like it's a visit to one of your properties, an individual visit, or you will consider if someone goes from the UK side to the US one, like a single visit. How do you want to report this? And this will change a lot in dependency of, like, for example, if it is a huge organization, like if there are like individual managers for each country, I'm pretty sure that let's say if the US one, and if you get a lot of visits from the UK, you don't want that these visits are attributed necessarily to the UK property only, but you want to be seen that these are seen also as individual visits to your property, right? So there are a lot of, not only from a tracking perspective, but from a logical business type of metrics and attribution perspective that needs to be taken into consideration here.
That's a great just overview and very detailed, by the way, description of how to think about all this. So can you explain the hreflang tag? What is that used for? And then I believe you have a tool that helps people generate their hreflang tag.
Yeah, indeed. Well, hreflang tag was released for Google in order to avoid having this type of situations that, for example, when you are in Australia and you get page results from the UK, and that will make even sense if the page or the content only had a UK version, but sometimes this content also had a Australian version. But since the UK version had much more link authority, link popularity and authority, it ended up outranking all of the other versions, even the local version, and the user ended up having or ended up going to the page that was not the correct one for their country, right? So the hreflang annotation, what it does is that you can use it to tag the language and alternatively the country target for each one of your pages, and then you will also connect and refer the alternatives of each page for the additional language or countries that you're targeting with. So, for example, if I have my about Aleyda page on my site in Spanish and English, my aleydasolis.com /about me page will specify that this is the EN page targeting to English, and then that this page has a sister page in Spanish that is in aleydasolis.com /es/sobre Aleyda, and this one has a tag referring to the URL, but with the value of ES Spanish, right? So you will annotate like this every alternative language or country version that each page of your site has.
Makes
so
sense.
Google can understand. Yeah. So for example, you will have then the situations that if at some point you have a Spanish for Spain version, but you also have a Mexican page in Spanish, and Google will say, I will rank this and I will rank this page in Spanish for Spain because it ended up getting it as the one that has much more authority, let's say. But since you added the hreflang annotation, Google will end up showing the Mexican one because you have specified them that, hey, look, I have this additional alternative version for this specific audience. So they will end up showing the right one, not the one that will outrank because of all the type of factors, right?
Yes, and we'll link to your tool in the show notes as well. I was playing around with it. It's really useful. You mentioned something earlier that I did want to talk about because we're talking about international SEO, but in the context initially of a site that is in different countries or targeting multiple languages. But I want to mention to the listeners, international SEO can be an opportunity, like you mentioned earlier. If you have a site that's in English, why not think about targeting Spanish or people in other countries, right? So can you speak to that a little bit? Like, is this actually a good marketing and business opportunity to try to cater to other countries, other languages?
Yes, it did. And actually, it might be one of the easier ones, even if it is in another language, and then you will need to end up like at some point even hiring staff that are able to support your customers in that language. But for example, let's say Spanish in the US. You already have a lot of people in the US that speak Spanish internally in the country. And then you have a huge market, not only in Spain, but in Latin America. And so, for example, if what you deliver doesn't have like a local restriction, if it is easy for you to send it to any country, anywhere in the world, actually. And then, and then if you validate and you check that there's enough search volume that is attractive for these markets, usually markets that are non-US will likely tend to be less competitive. Huh. Only a few European markets, I will say maybe the UK or Germany, are somehow also as competitive. Of course, there will always be industry that are highly competitive, let's say tourism or financial, right? But in general, I would say other countries that are non-US countries are much less competitive than the US. So you will end up having an easier time to rank and being the best. And actually, this is a very common scenario that I find with my clients and a few clients in Latin America, for example, that the top sites ranking in their industry are like Spanish versions of big American brands, right? Mm. But then, of course, that only by linking from their US or global domain, they already have like enough, of course, linking between all the international versions that they have. Like one example, Airbnb. They will end up ranking for all the top terms of keywords in Mexico, in Colombia, in Argentina, whatever, right? And then you will see them all there, but then you will realize they are being ranked there, not because they highly targeted or highly optimized towards each one of these countries, because of course they are huge. This is not a priority market for them, for sure. So you realize that you can come up rather easily with a strategy to around them, just by not necessarily being as a highly authoritative like them, because they will highly like have much more of a high authority than you, but by targeting much more those specific queries and the actual terms and keywords are being used by the audience, because you are really doing a keyword analysis and audience analysis of that specific market, and they haven't. They have just translated, and you can really see the difference from in that regard. So yes, I would say that there's a huge opportunity if you take it seriously. I mean, if you have like a real SEO doing an actual analysis there, not just translating. That's the big mistake, I will say, in this sector, in international, right? Just assuming that it will be easier, and that how many international versions do you need? Oh, like let's enable one for each European country, or let's enable one for all Europe, and then you realize that you cannot rank with only one version for everything, right? So this type of decisions that you really need to validate to which countries does it make sense, or which international audiences are really looking for your product, and does it make sense to enable your presence for? What can you expect from them? Which are the competitors there? How easier it will be? So a proper analysis of it all. But of course, if you do it well, I'm pretty sure that you will likely find a few good opportunities, and if you implement all the process accordingly, you will likely to have good results at the end of the day.
Very interesting. So for all the listeners out there, they may be an opportunity for you, but like Aleyda says, if you do it right, you can't just do a simple translation, expect it to work. Before we get to mobile SEO, I just want to ask, because oftentimes I'm asked about international SEO experts to follow, to learn about international SEO. And so I think of you, I think of Gianluca, who I'll link to in the show notes, but do you have some other international SEO experts that you follow, that you recommend that the listeners can, follow on Twitter and read their content and things like that?
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, there are a few of us, and each one of us also are much like more targeted to one's areas or others. Like, for example, Snap, he's very targeted towards Spanish and link building, and he's very good at it, and the content too. And then, for example, Giselle Navarro, she's in the UK, she's based in the UK, and she's also great in outreach, in multilingual outreach. And then Lisa Myers, she has an agency, to Verb Search, and they are highly targeted, again, in content and link building strategy too, and international outreach all over Europe. So yes, I think that there are a few of us, and all of us are also targeted in different areas too. So yes, there's a lot of opportunity there.
I'll link to those names in the show notes, and it seems like there's probably an opportunity to make just a Twitter list of international SEO experts, perhaps, and just give an easy way for people to find and follow them. Like I said, because I always only think of yourself and Gianluca and Zeph you mentioned, so it'd be great to have that list. I want to talk a little bit about mobile SEO. Yeah. This is also an area that I know you are an expert in. You spend a lot of time working on mobile SEO. I'm going to link to some slides in the show notes from a presentation I believe you gave. It's called Mobile First SEO, the Marketer's Edition, from 3XE Digital. The first question around mobile SEO is, can you explain the mobile first index? I think there's still some confusion about that. So tell the listeners, what does that mean exactly?
Well, it means that instead of Google, until now, Google had really relied on desktop crawling. Even if you had a mobile version, even if they had smartphone crawlers, at the end of the day, their index relied on what they found on desktop, and by their desktop crawlers, and that is now going to change. Now they will rely first for their index from what they find on mobile by the mobile crawlers. So realistically, that means that you may want to, well, not necessarily provide like a duplicated content or value or presence in your mobile version, because until now you were not necessarily being accessed or ranked by that presence, right? A lot of people say, oh, but I have a responsive web design, so by default I am optimized for mobile, right? That is not true. Maybe your responsive configuration is not the correct one, and you don't have the viewport correctly set, let's say, or you're not really providing the best potential speed on when accessing with the mobile crawler, or even you are like blocking some resources, some scripts in when crawling with the mobile crawler, and then the mobile crawler cannot access to the actual content of your pages. I actually had that case with a client, and I found that on an audit, that when I simulated the Google bot and tried to access to the mobile version, I always was receiving like a warning, like a pop-up, because they had set something under hosting that for some reason generated this type of warnings and that pop-up, right? So this type of things, it's very, very important that we validate well, that we provide relevant content, relevant information, also in a mobile presence when being crawled with the mobile crawler, and being accessed also as a user on mobile devices. And something also critical too, not only technically, but also from a search behavior perspective. All of these times, and we have had all of the keyword research, competition research, like all of our analysis targeted towards the behavior that we had on desktop. And in fact, more and more tools now are supporting mobile filters. So when we do now a keyword research or competition research, we should actually go and filter and segment and identify those specific queries and behavior that are now happening on mobile. Just not extrapolate the content that we have been optimizing for desktop all this time, because that might necessarily match the type of behavior that our audience have on mobile on one hand, and then on the other hand, we might not necessarily be providing like the actual, like the most relevant content and the actual information that people on mobile are looking to obtain specifically. So we might also be missing opportunities there, and at some point Google will not end up like ranking us well on mobile because of that. Something also critical too, just to finish this. Well, the next step is that yes, Google will turn to mobile first, and at some point they have said that they will turn to mobile only, and this makes total sense, because more than I think it was like 60% already, or something like very important, like the last data that they gave, the last stats of searches in general, right, were already generated from mobile devices, not desktop ones. So at the end of the day, the users are reacting to the reality that searches are being generated and being done from mobile devices. So at the end of the day, they need to take the factor that they have always been taken into consideration, but from their mobile crawler and the mobile presence that you have, right? So it's important also always validate, because what I say, and the stats that they release from time to time, right? That might, of course, change by country, by industry, whatever. I had a client last year that they were from machinery, big B2B type of content, chemical machinery. Of course, their mobile traffic was like 30% or even less, not so high. Another client that I have is a delivery company in here in Europe. Their mobile traffic is almost 70-something%. So it's the difference can be huge. So it's very important that you validate yourself what is happening right now on your site and in your industry as a whole. And there are like very valuable tools, like for example, SEMrush already have the mobile filter for the US, so you can actually see and obtain that data for mobile of keyword data. Systrix also is another tool that you can use to do competition research and identify the actual queries and visibility on mobile. And Google Search Console has also the mobile filter. So we don't realize, but we already have many tools that we can use to filter and segment mobile data to identify this type of specific behavior to target.
It really sounds like Google calling it a mobile first index is almost a little misleading, because what you're really talking about is not just the index. Like, that makes you think they're referring to the content that they have in their index, but it's really what you're talking about is everything about how Google crawls and discovers content. So does this even relate to the architecture of your mobile site, the click depth, the internal linking of your mobile site as well? It really sounds like this is way beyond just the index.
Yeah, you know what? The fact is, like, last week, I was at this event in Amsterdam, Friends of Search, right? And Gary was speaking there and talking about all the trends of SEO and search in 2017.
And that's Gary Eyes from Google, right?
Yeah, Gary Eyes from Google, indeed. And of course, one of these big trends was this. And he acknowledge and mention that, of course, if they are moving and transitioning to a mobile first index, the link authority, link popularity was not going to be measured by the links that you were getting to your desktop presence. So, of course, if you have a responsive web design or a dynamic serving mobile configuration, it's okay, because those external links are going to the same URLs. But if you have a parallel or independent mobile configuration with a name subdomain showing your mobile version, that rel canonical alternate configuration logic,
yes,
it's not won't necessarily work in the same way. But the one thing that he said, that they acknowledge that you cannot ask all the people right now, oh, let's change the canonicalization on your mobile presence, because that will make, like, it will take so long and it will generate many errors, very likely, right? So he mentioned that what they are doing is that they will take all of these scenarios with a grain of salt, of course, and make sure that they will understand that in these situations they will still take into consideration the links that have been pointing all this time to desktop, and to try to come up with a relationship there. But indeed, I mean, he also mentioned that they haven't yet completely find out how AMP will work with this. So they are still, like, analyzing and seeing how they can, like, take all this inherited configuration that we have had all this time of our websites to make it sound and effective for mobile first or mobile only type of processing, indeed.
I'm glad you mentioned AMP. I wanted to ask you about that. You do mention a few scenarios that you recommend using AMP in your slides. What are some reasons? I still get asked this I got asked from a client that is a college, and they're asking if they should use AMP. And in my mind, that's way off the path of why somebody should use AMP. It's not a scenario to use it. So what are the reasons why somebody should consider switching their site to AMP?
If you don't have a mobile version at all, and it's non-viable for you to implement a responsive web design or a dynamic serving configuration, and there's no possibility. So the alternative that you had been thinking about all this time might be an independent mobile configuration. So the option now for you, instead of an independent mobile configuration, should be AMP. Rather easily, because still with AMP, at the end of the day, you generate a parallel structure /AMP or whatever you generate, where you generate the AMP pages. But you will make sure, of course, that these AMP pages will be super fast. And now there are so many additional components that a few months ago, I had a client that implemented AMP right at the beginning, and their UI was so poor, so minimalistic, and so, I mean, they didn't even have a menu. And of course, they oh my God, their visibility, new sessions exploded there. But then you see the engagement, you see the bounce rate crazily high, 85%. What are you telling me, right? And of course, I realized, like, of course it's 85% if you don't even allow the user to continue browsing in your mobile site. And they say, oh, it's true. It's because we implemented it when the word not components. Components are like the resources that AMP provides to users to use in the HTML pages, in the AMP HTML pages, right? So now there are many more, and there is a very consistent and important path of new developments that they have shared to start supporting much more functionalities, so many of them related even with e-commerce and much more complex type of sites. So I will say that at this point, if you don't have a mobile version and you cannot implement typically like a good responsive that you want to make sure that it will be super fast, AMP can be a really good option for you. If you're in the media, if you have a blog, for example, it's so straightforward to set and enable an AMP version with WordPress. There are so many plugins to implement this, and what you will need to make sure is just to make sure to personalize what is generated there, because it will likely need personalization, of course. And then another very common scenario is that if you do have even like a responsive web design, but it's so slow that it takes forever to load, and it's really harming your user experience. Let's forget about SEO for a moment, but remember that the speed requirements and might be much more like restrictive in mobile. But so in that regard, I will say that AMP can also be a good alternative. So I will say that yes, if you're in media, if you don't have a mobile site, or if your mobile site is super slow, these are the situations where it will be a rather straightforward like decision to go to AMP. Yeah.
Awesome. I want to save time to ask you a couple other things about your Facebook presence and also your book. I want to give you a chance to plug your book a little bit at the end. So we might run a couple minutes over if that's okay with you. I don't know if you have something on the next hour. But Facebook, what I noticed was, and this is a little bit more for me, but hopefully some of the listeners get some value as well. I noticed that you're running you have a personal Facebook page, but also a business Facebook page where you're a public figure. It's Aleyda SEO Tips at facebook.com/Aleyda SEO Tips. So first of all, why did you decide to set up a public figure page for yourself? And it still looks and acts like you're interacting as a person, but why did you decide to set up a business page like that?
Yeah, because of course in my personal one, I post so many other things that are not necessarily purely SEO, but also much more personal nature. So in that professional one is purely SEO. But yes, at the end of the day, I'm a person, so I would like to interact with people as a person too, not necessarily as a distant brand, right? What I need to acknowledge, and also something that I love, is that I have the opportunity, or it was easy to me at some point to have the opportunity to become an independent consultant, because I had some sort of known personal brand in the industry, right? And a reason of that is that I share a lot. I share resources, I share my knowledge, which is actually something that I really enjoy. I don't do it just because of promotion, but it's because of something that I really enjoy. So having my professional Facebook page allows me to, focus and share purely professional things and tips and resources that I find not only mine, but the ones that I find useful with the community and anybody who wants to keep notice of them. And then also I have Twitter, and in Twitter it's a little bit much more complex. So in my Twitter profile, you will find everything mixed, personal and professional too. Yeah. Yeah.
What I'm wondering about the Facebook business page, because I technically have a personal Facebook account. It's totally on lockdown though. Nobody can find me unless I give them the address for it. I don't use it. And then I have a business profile set up like you do, but I'm totally lost as to how do I interact as me, the public figure, which is a business page? Can you engage and comment and interact with other pages and follow other people like you do normally as a personal account, but with the business thing? Like, does that actually work in the same way? How do you distinguish those two things?
I don't necessarily follow other businesses or interact with other businesses. What I do is actually just interact with the community and the people who actually comment on anything, right, that I publish. Like, for example, yesterday we had this Q&A with Google in Spanish that we do, right, every couple of months. And somebody was asking, what are you going to talk about? Or here's one of the questions that I would like them to ask. And of course, I answer, okay, thanks, I will take that into consideration. So of course I need to say, I will take that into consideration. Yeah. It will be too weird to say, yes, Aleyda will take that into consideration, like a third person, or if it wasn't me, right? So on that regard, it's I act and I behave as a person, I would say.
Yeah.
But a person in a professional type of setting. That is the only difference, I would say.
Let me ask slightly differently. So in terms of how you actually interact, yeah, I get that. Like you want to act like a person, but technically speaking in Facebook, if I'm on, let's say, Rand Fishkin's public profile Facebook, how do I interact and engage and comment as Dan Shore, the business page, not Dan Shore, how do I actually make it so all of my interactions and engagements in Facebook are of me, the public figure? And this might be a super basic or novice Facebook question. I don't know, but all I know is I have a personal profile and a business profile, and I can't seem to figure out how to use and engage and interact as my business profile version of me in Facebook. Is there some kind of setting, or how do you do that?
Not really. I have to say something, right? That I don't really do much with my professional Facebook page to really engage with other brands, only with the community, with the people who follow me. What I do, and actually to promote and on my professional page, is set the ads, Facebook ads that are super cheap and also so easy to segment or whatever. So for example, when I publish something, that I use that to promote any content that I share in my Facebook page. I will go and boost that post, so much more people than the natural ones that already follow me will likely to see. So I use that specifically. So that definitely provides an extra value. I will say that instead of you sharing something, a blog post that you published a few days ago, for example, instead of you go and publish that on your own Facebook, and then only your friends will be able to see it, or the people who follow you will be able to see it. If you do have like a professional page, you will be able to also create ads. So any people with certain profiles that you set and segment will be able to get that. And at the end of the day, you will be able to bring more people to follow you and like you like this. I will say that's the critical thing, I will say, yeah.
I think a light bulb just went off there. It's like nowadays, it feels like you need to be a rocket scientist to be able to just use and make sense and understand Facebook. I was trying to get a client to share their pixel with us so we could run retargeting ads for them. And it took us, like me and a Facebook genius consultant, it took us like 45 minutes to figure it out. It's really ridiculous, and it seems overly complicated. So I know we're a couple minutes over. I want to ask you quickly about your book. And I forgot to bring the link up, but I remembered being proud of myself because I do have a little experience playing piano in salsa bands. So I was around a lot of Spanish speaking environments for a while. And I know that your book said the essential keys of SEO, because clave is key. Clave is a very important element of salsa music, as I'm sure you know. So I know that word. So I was proud of myself for knowing that. But tell us a little bit about your book and why you decided to write it.
Well, the reality is that when I started learning SEO 10 years ago, there was like nothing like written in a way that was like a full manual that will take you step by step, right? I remember actually going to SEO Moss at that time and learning a lot from the resources in the community, Webmaster World, etc. Right, other communities that were, but in English a lot. Then there were other books in Spanish from people that I respect a lot. You know what? The thing is, like, I'm a very practical person. I'm very actionable, and everything that I do is very like that. So when I read a book that is half of the book and 1/4 of the book is about the history of search and whatever, it's like, oh my God, why? No, I just tell me why is this important, what I'm going to get, which are the first steps, etc. like this. So I really wanted to write something that will allow people is like me to really fulfill that need, to have like a manual, a support manual to go step by step, to go through the whole process, to actually not necessarily only learn the concept, because you can learn the concepts from so many courses right now, but having like a place where you can not only learn that, but actually how to apply them. How many links do you need? Actually, how many links? Like how links are like few or very little, or do you have actually a lot? It depends, right? Yeah. So how do you know that? How many do you need? Well, because you need to validate this and this and this and take this into consideration. So these type of things that are much more trickier to get for free on the web, or to have like a overall manual where you will see all this in one place. So I wanted to give that in Spanish, and that's the reason I wrote the book. The book is actually very light, it's 200 pages, and very visual again, and very actionable with tools. Again, the goal of the book is to facilitate the SEO for people who are starting. So what I also did was I did certain agreements with tool makers, so I could include for free or with a lot of discounts many of the tools like that you see nowadays. Like, for example, you can get 2 months for free for SEMrush with a Guru account, like Kerbu, Euro Profiler, OnPage. So many tools that you can use through the SEO process. You can get for a lot of discounts, with a good discount, or even for much more time for free with the book. So hopefully it will not only help the people to understand more SEO, but actually allow them to start implementing their own SEO process, which at the end of the day is what really makes you an SEO. Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like you can get a lot of the value of the book back just by using some of these links.
You know what? The reality is that the book is 19 euros, and then only these 2 months for free of a Guru account is 100 and something of value, right? So, and it's so funny because I have a lot of people asking me from Twitter. It's like, is it true that the book includes like 2 months for free? I was like, yes, okay, I buy it. It's like, oh my God, there's much more on the books. People.
That's a really good incentive. So is the book in Spanish only?
Yes. Okay. Yes, right now it is. Yep. I have been, like, every time that I am asked, because I am asking Twitter about a potential translation, whatever, I answer, copy my editor who's in Twitter too. So he sees that the book is requested, right? Oh. But he had told me that the actual process to have it translated to another language is that a publishing house from another language comes to them and buy the rights. Yeah, it's an old school type of industry, sadly. So so let's see if at some point I make that happen, or that happens, or I can incentivize or promote in some way so it ends up happening.
Excellent.
Let's see.
If I do have any listeners that speak Spanish, I don't know if I do, but if I do, we'll link to it and they can go check out your book. It's in Amazon. It's in everything. I noticed you've got 5-star reviews, so it looks really nice.
I have only nine reviews because, people is so, oh my God, people go and review the books that you like, not only for bad things, but yeah. I only have 9 reviews, but all of them are 5 stars and with real comments.
Yes. So, that's what I meant is it's very nicely, it's very well reviewed in Amazon, which is great. So we're going to wrap things up in a second. Yeah. Tell the listeners where they can find you online and connect with you, your website, your Twitter, all that stuff.
Well, you can find me in my website, aleydasolis.com, and then also in Twitter. I'm very active in Twitter at Aleyda. And just in case Twitter dies, everybody's saying, hopefully not, I have also a Facebook page, Aleyda SEO Tips, because I'm trying to share these video tips little by little. So you will find that there too. And if you search for me, if you search for my name, Aleyda, in Google, I will come up with the first result.
You're number one? That's awesome. That's great. That's a true testament to your SEO right there.
Well, you know what? It's not a very common name. So I'm not a Maria. If I were like a Jane or Maria, that would be far more difficult. But I have to say that, you know what? There is an Aleyda that is very, very famous in Latin America. It's a woman who won a beauty queen, whatever prize. So she has a lot of links from very authoritative sources, but it's still like that. I am like above her.
It's funny. It reminds me if you go to Google now and you just type Seth, Seth Godin's blog comes up number 1. I've always remembered that as like that to rank number 1 for like a common name like that really means that you've made it and you're successful. Yeah. So that's funny. But Aleyda, it's been great to have you on the show. I feel like we could chat even much longer about international and mobile, and we didn't even talk about HTTPS, but I'll link to it anyways in the show notes so people can check out. You've got a migration checklist that's really useful for that. But again, it's been great having you on the show. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see everyone next time.